right, welcome to episode 3 of the We Are Not That Simple podcast, brought to you by Grace and Garfield Christian Reformed Church and Animated Concepts, LLC. Today, we have Ms. LaShone Kelly, which we're going to find out a little bit more. But if you are interested in this content, please like the video, share the video, and if you really want to subscribe. I don't really do that subscribing thing, but if you're into that. So LaShone Kelly, LaShone, so you've been in the neighborhood for a long time, like you in every essence as a person and family, right? How long does that go back?
So I was born on the west side of the park, so I started out in West Garfield Park, and then when I married in 1983, I moved over to the east side of the park.
Oh, so you had a cross-cultural marriage.
I did, yes. yes. And so my husband's family, so I can say this. So I've been in the Garfield Park community since 1968, 64. I was born in 64, we were here, so I'm going to go with 1964.
Okay. So if you were to describe however you can remember as a little girl, what do you remember about the West Side from back then?
Oh, it was gorgeous. So we lived right at 4151 West Washington.
Okay.
And
isn't that right by
gorgeous.
GPCC?
It is right there. So I'm back home again.
So all right.
Close to my office. So Madison Street was magnificent. So you had Goldblatt's, Woolworth, Kresge's Five and Dime, Flourishing Shoes, the Professional Building, did we have skating? I can't remember if the skating rink was there, but Alex Movie Theater. You had Cascade Bowling Alley, and so Madison Street was a self-contained shopping district.
Okay.
Bernie Brothers Donuts. You had a record shop, Elfish Furniture Store, and they had a really kind of middle line of furniture, and then there were a couple of specialty shops, head shop, and so it was just really awesome.
Sounds like the place to be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The A&P, people may not remember S&H green stamps, and so we would collect those. So I'm really telling my age. You would turn them in, and you could still turn in pop bottles and get a deposit return for them.
Very nice. When do you remember that changing?
Oh, that would be...
If you want to move the mic a little bit closer. There we go.
That would be the riots when King passed away. A lot of people, and I'm going to stick to my recollection of this, and I'm not changing it, because there are a lot of stories about what happened to Madison Street along that, starting at Central, Hamlin, down to about Costner.
Okay.
So people say, oh, it was totally destroyed. Not true.
Okay.
Some damage, but I was still shopping there in 1980, so apparently didn't all get destroyed. Some damage, but that was a volatile time. People were very upset, but Madison still kept its integrity, most of it. But you did see businesses not put more money. So they just let it die out.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so it was there. They kept the stores running, but they didn't do any improvements.
So it sounds like it more destroyed it economically speaking, or from the business standpoint. The businesses were no longer interested in continuing to build things up and invest.
Right, they didn't build up. They took our money. So, of course, they got our money. We continued to shop there, but they didn't improve like a business should. So you should reinvest, make it better. And then they started tearing buildings down with no plan to do an infill. So that's always a bad idea for community. You have to be replacing it with something. And so if you keep tearing down with no replacement, of course you get deterioration and you get disinterest.
Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot. There's this building right here on the corner, Walnut and St. Louis, with the X on it, that's been there for years. Several people have thought of trying to get it, but nobody has been able to get it. So it's in demolition court right now. And there's some people that don't want it torn down, to a certain degree, myself included. But the main problem is while it's there, it's vacant and nothing's happening. And then once they tear it down, it'll be vacant, nothing's happening. So there's no real plan for it in any way, shape, or form. And this is something that's been brought to powers that be by several different parties over many years. I think.
Who did you talk to? Because interesting enough, that's what I do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think we had talked about it years ago, but at the time it had like so many leans from different parties that people were trying to track down, and
it looks like it's been about close to 7 years since that building has been there.
Yeah,
and so there are some steps that can be taken.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should definitely talk about saving that building, because one of the things that I am really advocating for is affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And if we keep knocking down our affordable twos, there's going to be more of a displacement. I don't like the word gentrification so much, but there's going to be displacement because we keep getting rid of what can be affordable housing.
Yeah, and the only way to get more housing is to build brand new, which is a lot more expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because it's always cheaper to rehab what's there than new construction.
Yeah, and I feel like that's typically a missing piece in a lot of the conversations about building new affordable housing. It's like, yeah, I see what you're trying to say, but building brand new from scratch, it's a long process. It's a lot of money and materials. It's very difficult to do without subsidizing.
Correct.
And
it doesn't give housing to the residents who are here.
Mm-hmm.
So far we know on the west side of the park, the average income, it's about $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm adding on because we got that underground money that people don't talk about. And then if you come on the east side of the park, about $35,000.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're going to count that money that people are like, shh, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do new construction, you're talking about $350. The residents here can't afford that and sustain it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can get them in there probably, but they probably are able to sustain it maybe 5 years before they end up in a foreclosure position. So.
Yeah. And that's one of the tricky things that, you know, in selling real estate is just figuring out. I feel like whenever I talk to people, there's this, well, it should be this way, but it's really complicated. Like one thing that got me a lot of times is there's a lot of people that I meet that have grown up here, you know, grew up poor over here on the west side, but they got their education. They're making some decent money, but they don't want to buy, you know, they want to buy something that they worked hard for. And so because I found this when I renovate a property for somebody like that, I get, oh, you know, you're gentrifying the neighborhood. I'm like, no, this person's been here.
Right.
This buyer was here for a long time, and they've worked their way up. They want something better, and they've been able to afford it. I don't. What do you want them to do? Move out? Because that's one of the big things. Like I know when I was growing up, there was this mentality being taught to me in school, and even amongst family. It was grow up, get your education, do good, and get as far away from here as possible. Go live with the white people because that's where it's at. And like I always tell people the story is when I bought my first house on the west side, I was 26 years old. That's an accomplishment.
Yes.
But my father cried. Like he felt because I was the smart one growing up in my family. You should have been able to get out. And I'm like, I could get out, but financially, it makes a lot more sense for me to stay in. But it's like, I feel like that's the constant mentality is if you do well, you should go somewhere else.
Well, you know, people look at that story, and it's one that my husband and I have kind of raised our family on. Rich dad, poor dad.
Mm.
How do the rich sustain and maintain their money? You got to live a little below your actual means. So, yeah, I think we are in like the best place in the world. Mm-hmm. People used to ask me, where do I live? And I would say, why? Because our location is so good. Mm-hmm. We're kind of centrally located as far as the city of Chicago with regard to traveling. Mm-hmm. So we're by all the expressways. We're by the Green Line.
The Green Line, the Blue Line, the Metro Line.
The Metro. And so why would I leave? I mean, it's like, no, it's great. And my block is pretty quiet. My neighbors have been on the block 80 years. We all know each other. I can borrow a cup of sugar. If my children, when they were younger, somebody had their eye on them, and they would say, LaShawn, look out your back door.
Yeah.
I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
And so it was more not just a neighborhood, but a community, a family.
Yeah.
And so I like that idea. I was a real estate appraiser for many, many years, and I find the more expensive the houses get, the less neighborly you are. They're working because you got to work to pay for that stuff.
Yeah.
And so they're busy, always busy, so you don't get to know your neighbor as well as a smaller community that's, now I don't even want to use to say struggling, that's growing together. And just because you get money doesn't mean that you have to go.
Yeah. Because I feel like that was a big trend throughout the 90s and 2000s as people were becoming more commuters for everything.
Yes.
And we see that both in work, but also in like church.
Yes.
And so the idea of tight-knit communities, even the community church, is kind of dissipated. I remember when I was going to church growing up, we all knew each other. We're like a family.
Right.
And then as I got older, people move out to Bolingbrook.
Right.
And out to Schaumburg. And some of them were still coming to church.
Yeah, they drive in.
Yeah, but it's like it's hard to maintain the
relationship and for them to be compassionate and empathetic, because if you don't see it, then you ain't got to think about it. And so for my husband and I, a lot of our friends moved away. We stayed. We stayed for a couple of reasons. You need some anchors in the community. And so if everybody who's doing well leaves, how do you teach the other people how to gain those same tool sets? That is not impossible. And you make your community, I don't have to move around a bunch of white people to live, quote unquote, like they think is good. I define for me what is the American dream. And I think the minute we let somebody else tell us that the American dream is, you got 2.5 kids, you got the 2 cars, and you got your job with your 401k. Keep your 401k. I like my freedom. So I'd rather have the freedom to move around as I please than, I'm going 9 to 5, I'm punching in the clock. That's not for me.
Yeah.
Now, it's for someone, and that's wonderful if that's what you want. But at the same time, I don't think I should be ridiculed if I want something different. I've got 15 biological children.
Woo!
With the same father. It's not a blended family. I have to make this statement because people, kind of wonder, hey, I'm like, no, he's the dad, I'm the mom. They're all ours. We can't sell them. We're stuck. Each of them have a different idea of what living well is. And it's okay. Some of them want to be a doctor. Some of them just want to chill. They don't want the stress of it. And it's okay. They're all going to pick something different. Did they find happiness and contentment?
Yeah.
And we don't push them,
And, I think years ago I used to teach like aspects of health for a hospital, specifically sex education, but then I would also do diabetes and nutrition. But we would always start our lessons with having the kids think about their goals and dreams in life. And it's interesting that when it came to the goals and dreams, they were all very similar. When I come teaching the west side, if I go to the north side, all the things were very similar, but they had to be asked in order to think about that. Because me and my wife have the conversation about what we think of as the good life. And whenever we have those conversations, we almost have to tweak the way that we're living our life, because we find ourselves pursuing things that actually have no business in what we say is the good life.
Correct.
So we're pursuing things that we don't even want.
Right.
And I feel like that is so common. Like the idea of community, what you just described as community, we all know each other. It's like a little family.
Right.
If I were to go around the neighborhood and ask even all the new people that just moved in, if that's what they would want, that would be awesome. That's the goal. That's what we want. How often do you talk to your neighbors? How often when you have your events, are your neighbors involved?
Right.
And they would say that they want things, but they're not actually working towards those things that they say that they want.
It's almost the opposite. So you say, yes, those are good things, but then you spend all your time getting a bigger paycheck, getting the accolades to your name. Yeah, I'm manager, I'm this, I'm that. When the comfort of that family structure without being blood related, but knowing that I can rely on another person.
Yeah.
You know, we did this big study where Rush did about the life expectancy on the West Side.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's different? Ours is 10 years lower than somebody who lives in Oak Park. Why is that? What are we worrying about? Where don't we feel comfortable? And even when we pursue those degrees in that suburban type lifestyle, why aren't we living longer? You know, it's like, okay, what gives here? What's going on? And so dissatisfaction of self can really destroy and make you do the opposite of what you need to do, because you always got your eye on something else. My grandmother used to say, if you do a comparison, you're going to find those who are less, and you're going to be feeling real good about yourself. And then you look a little further, there are going to be those who are doing better, and then now you don't feel so good. And so now you kind of keep trying to get to this place instead of, who am I? What works for me? You know, people are like, you got 15 kids? I'm like, I didn't ask you to have any kids.
Yeah.
This is my life. This is what my husband and I wanted. And if it's not for you, wonderful.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I feel like, again, 90s, 2000s, it became a thing where don't judge me for not having a lot of kids. And, okay, fine, you don't want to have kids, that's your thing. But then where it ends up going is, well, those that do have a lot of kids, well, we can judge them now. I was like, well, how about you just let those people do it if that's what they want? Or I remember walking, I used to go to church with a family that they had 8 kids.
Okay.
And they lived across the street from the church, and they would walk single file to church. And somebody said, oh, man, I feel sorry for that wife. And I'm like, why do you feel sorry for that wife? You know, because you don't want to have that many kids doesn't mean she's unhappy. And sure, having 8 kids, I'm sure that's a difficult thing. But it's also rewarding.
It is.
And so there's a give and a take there. And you decided not to have any, so you have certain freedoms. But there's certain things on the back end, privileges that come from having those kids that you don't get.
That you don't get. And you know, I tell my children, because I'm like, don't let people pressure you. You come from a family of 15. You'll decide what you want your family to look like. Dad and I decided that this was for us, and this is what we want. It's a lot of hard work, but we were up for the task, and we're okay with it. And if someone else isn't, you know, fine. I got into this big debate with this guy about abortion and homosexuality. And at the time, I had a Mayor Lori Lightfoot T-shirt on because we had done a cleanup that morning.
Oh, okay.
And so he said, well, you know, you support, you know, lesbian. And I'm like, where is he getting this from? And then he's like, I'm like, really? I'm like, I haven't had that conversation with you. So he said, well, you're wearing one of the mayor's T-shirts. I said, oh. I said, and he confessed to be a Christian. I said, oh, now you're being judgmental. He said, what do you mean? I said, but you don't actually know why I'm wearing the T-shirt. And so I said, you should ask me why. He said, why are you wearing a T-shirt? I said, because we were doing a cleanup at Melody School that the mayor sponsored, so our babies don't have to walk through with needles and trash and garbage, and they have something clean. So this happened to be the T-shirt. He said, oh. He said, well, did you vote for her? I said, that's none of your business.
Wait, none of your business? But that is also...
You know, because you have to let each person... I don't even talk to my husband about how I vote. It's a choice, but it's not based on the things people think. When I vote for a person, I'm looking at the policies that they're going to create. Yeah. And if those policies are going to be far-reaching... And I don't want that it's going to just benefit one group. I want policies that are going to impact in a positive way the larger group so that most people are benefiting from it. And then we talked about abortion. And I just said, you should probably use some more compassion when you're talking to people. And you're a man talking to a woman about abortion. I don't even know if that goes together. But I said, just exercise a little more compassion. Yeah. And he's like, well, do you agree with... I'm like, dude, I got 15 kids. I say, however, it's only one sin that the Bible says is unforgivable, and that's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. But if you want to win people over and you want them to start thinking about, should I do this? Win them over with compassion. I say, because I've counseled women in that most of the times they think this is their only out. How do we win them over? You know, you don't do it by hitting them over the head. Exercise some compassion. But at the end of the day, one may decide, I'm going to do this anyway. Another may decide, you've won me over. And so if you get one, that's a win.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I feel like so often the conversation is about winning the debate, so to speak, rather than, because again, as a pastor, if somebody goes ahead and does that, what am I? Well, now you're unforgivable. No, it's like I'm going to try to talk you into help you lead a godly life, but you're gonna fail. I'm gonna fail,
and that's not the only sin.
Yeah, and that's not the only sin. There's a lot of other sins. We're all gonna fail. The idea of the Christian faith is that when we do fail, because we will. There's forgiveness there, but also when the issues are so complex. I mean, hence the name of this channel is "We Are Not That Simple." Like when I used to teach sex ed in for the hospital, you know, because we were government funded, we weren't allowed to bring any kind of religion or moral into it. So I would teach about abortion. I mean, but like how it affects the body, stuff like that. Correct. And inevitably, I would always have teachers, students raise their hand. Do you think it's okay for people to have abortion? And I would always have to say, that's not what I'm here to say. Exactly. For me, I'm not here to tell you, you know, if you have that question, go to your religious leader, whichever religion you practice, or your mom and dad, or wherever you get your morals from, go ask them. I'm just here to talk about the health. Here's the good, here's the bad. Correct. And then you make your decision based on your moral. But it's interesting to me, what I learned then is how uncomfortable people on both sides of the moral aisle are with that. I'm just going to give you the good, the bad, in a non-moralistic way. It's like, no, you must tell me this.
I can't, because it's a personal decision. And so my thing to him, I say, remember, because then he started questioning whether or not I was a Christian. I'm like, wow, I'm glad you're not the judge of that either. Because the relationship as a Christian is between you and God. And he's going to judge where my heart is. And then I got to answer to him, not to you, because it ain't your rule. So, like, really? But when you make it so, like, cut and dry, it's like, well, most people I know who have had abortions afterwards, they go through a lot. So psychologically, it's very daunting. It's your choice. He gave us free will. So even in the Christian realm, I keep saying, wow, he gave us free will. I say, what do you do with that? And they're like, well, he gives us the free will to choose. So do I have a right to usurp how I would choose onto another person? Yeah. I don't believe that I do. I could be wrong. I'm not going to find out till Jesus comes back.
Well, and I think that's one of the important aspects. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know. And that's becoming, I feel like that's very appropriate for today's time, where choice is becoming problematic for a lot of people. Yeah. The idea of giving people options. Well, you can choose to live this way or that way. I think one of the advantages of growing up poor is like the whole judgmental thing. We always judged everybody, but we're all like everybody's a hater. We're all roasting each other and stuff like that.
Right.
But I have a lot of family that doesn't live according to the Christian values that I have. in a variety of ways. Some are hardcore against abortion and will protest outside the clinic. Some have had several. Some are very anti homosexuality and all that, whatever all the letters are. And some are living out those lifestyles.
Right.
And whether I agree with them or not, they're my family. I love them.
Right.
When I have a family get together, I want them. I used to always tell people this story. I got this one family member, which I won't say in case they end up watching this. But whenever my phone rings and it's them, I don't want to answer it. Because I'm like, this is going to be frustrating. But I always answer it because they're family, they're blood. And
right.
I have, it's like, regardless of how I feel about it,
right, I
still love them.
Exactly.
And for me, I always say that's my brown privilege. That's my poor privilege, is that I have a much higher value on the relationships that I never had the luxury of letting go.
I think about that because to me, family is so important. Relationships are important. Where do I let it in? So I had a really tragic thing. My older brother, 2 years older than me, was slain by my first cousins. Mm. What do you do with that? Mm-hmm. And so family-wise, we really had to work that out. My mother's sister's children, mm-hmm. and my mother and her sister, like peas in a pot. Mm-hmm. How do you grow that relationship? How do you heal from that tragedy? And we did. Mm-hmm. It was a process.
Yeah.
We did. Didn't happen overnight. My mother and sister never parted ways. Mm-hmm. The daughter, she and I, good friends, we never parted ways, but it took us time to bring them other folks back into the mm-hmm. circle.
Yeah.
But they are back in the circle. Not that I'm going to hang out with them, because mm-hmm. I think I still feel some kind of way, mm-hmm. but the forgiveness part, that this thing happened and it's tragic, yeah, but I'm not going to let that hate or the thought of hate eat me up and destroy me. Mm-hmm. And so I know as a Christian, he says, if you don't forgive others, like, I'm not going to forgive you. Mm-hmm. And he says we are like filthy rags in his sight. Mm-hmm. So I need a lot of forgiveness, a lot of mercy, a lot of grace. So because of that, my attitude is I'm usually not going to be as harsh. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give the best advice I know from my experience. Mm-hmm. But then the ultimate thing is the person will have to choose for his or herself.
Yeah.
I had a gentleman who stayed mad at me for a really long time. I didn't even know he was mad at me. But we were having a discussion about Trump. Mm-hmm. And I defended Trump's action.
How dare you?
I know. And so the person didn't speak to me. And then months later, as he kind of thought about what the action was, he came, he said, Miss Kelly, I want to tell you something. I was like, he said, I have been mad at you. I was like, really? You didn't show it because we'd have interaction. He didn't. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And I was like, why? He said, because I couldn't believe you was sitting in that meeting agreeing with something that Trump said. I said, nobody is wrong 100% of
mm-hmm.
the time.
Even a broken clock is right 2 times a day.
Like, come on. And he said, I thought about it. He said, in that instance, he actually was right. I said, I know. And I said he was right. Because it is what it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't like probably 99.9% of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But occasionally, what he said actually was true.
Yeah. It's interesting because I always felt like what Trump revealed about a lot of people was their insistence on judgment of other people in the name of not being judgmental of other people. Like, it got me, it caught me off guard a little bit because I'm not a very political person. I don't really care for politicians, period. Like, I don't have a belief that any of them really know or care about my situation. And I don't necessarily hate on them for that. It's they're not responsible for me, so I don't expect them to care about me. They're in a really crazy environment. What do I care? But what do I know about them as individuals?
Right.
Even like a Trump. Like I don't know. I don't like his hairstyle. But there's a lot of in workings of different people, of Obama, of all these people, that it's like, if I knew them intimately, would I say the same things? Maybe. I got a lot of friends that I don't think are very praiseworthy people, but they're my friends. And chances are, if they get in a fight with somebody, I'm going to have their back, even though I probably shouldn't. But that's because they're my friend, and there's that loyalty of the relationship. But I remember talking with somebody when Trump was running the first time, and, she was very adamant about certain things. I remember, let's say, hypothetically, I voted for Trump. And she's like, oh, I just got sick to my stomach. And I was like, why? I brought up a hypothetical situation. Like, I didn't vote for him, but I just brought it in that hypothetical. I was like, that shows a certain problem with you and your ability to handle people who think differently than you.
Who think differently, right. We went to the West Coast this summer for vacation, and we ended up in Wyoming, and, of course, Trumpy area. And I had my mask on, and I told my kids, how did you let that lady get that close to me? Really, people? And so the young lady was saying, take your mask off. You don't need it here. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. And her thing was, if people are still catching COVID, why are we masking? And her experience, as I talked to her more, I didn't judge. Her opinion is coming from something. Well, her grandmother had gotten a shot and caught COVID and subsequently passed away. So, of course, her opinion of COVID and the shot and masking is going to be different because it's based on her experience. So I told him, like, wow. I said, I'm really sorry that happened to you. I say, basically, I think they don't know what this is. And they're doing every precautionary measurement that they can to try to combat it. And time will tell which one of those things served better and which ones were just like a no-go. But for me, I'm going to mask. Now, if you decide not to mask, unless you're breaking the law, I guess that's your choice. But there are times when, for the public good of everyone, we do certain things. We all got our chicken pox, most. We got our measles, most. People don't have any problem with getting the flu shot because it protects them, it protects others. But I think when government begins to demand that you do something, that's when people push back.
Yeah, and I think that's where the red flags come up, because it's like, again, I'm not a very political person, mainly because I don't trust any political people. And then when those people that I don't trust start saying, no, you got to do this, then my red flags go up, because I know you don't really care about me. So what is it that you are caring about that's making you want me to do this? Are you trying to sacrifice me?
Right. Am I the guinea pig? Are you experimenting?
And let's not pretend like that's a new thing, right? Like,
it is not new.
Like, we have been sacrificed before.
It is not new.
And that's why I'm just like, it's not that, because there's understanding on both sides. And and I used to always tell people this when I was younger and I started like studying a little bit of psychology. I was like, I hate psychology, because once I start understanding people, I can't be mad at them.
Correct.
And I think people have subconsciously noticed that, so they've stopped trying to understand people because they want to be mad.
That's interesting. Yeah, because once you take psychology, and that was one of my majors, when you look at how the mind works, then you are less angry, because it's like, oh, okay, I get it. I get why they feel that
you
way.
have to separate your judgment from your anger. For example, you take one of the mass serial killers, Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer's, and you start understanding the dysfunction in the way that their minds work. It's like you can kind of understand. That doesn't mean it's okay.
I'm not justifying, because people say, so you think it was okay he killed all those people? It's like, okay,
no,
time out.
He shouldn't have done it. He should be punished appropriately.
He should be punished.
But that doesn't mean I gotta feel some way about it.
What was the cause? What led him to being where he is? Something happened.
Yeah. And that happens in churches too, because, in the church, a lot of times, there's a lot of churches that are very against homosexuality.
Right.
And that's fine. That's how you interpret the scriptures. But then what do you do with that? Like, does somebody come and says, I'm gay? Does that mean you just start treating them really poorly? It's like, you can believe.
Or do you bring them over to an understanding of the word and why this behavior goes against what you say you believe?
Or at least try that. And if they reject that, you still don't have to slap them in the face. You can still be cordial.
Yeah, right.
And the opposite would be true. Like, so if you're in a church that is affirming of that, and you run into somebody who's not, they're not automatically a bigot. I actually had one instance once. I was at a bar, and somebody told me that, and I'm probably giving this person's identity away, but they told me they were Episcopalian. And at the time, I was going to Anglican church, and they're very similar. The Anglican came out of the Episcopalian church. Okay. But the main reason they separated was partially because of the issue of homosexuality. Okay. So I said, I go to Anglican church. He said, so you're a bigot.
Wow.
I was like, that's a little bit of a jump to conclusion. But it's like the difference in perspective of the organization to which I frequent means I must treat people a certain way. Right. And it's like, no, I have a lot of people in my life that I love dearly that do things that I think are despicable.
Right.
But I still love them, and I still treat them decently. If they engage in such behavior around me, I try to rebuke it, depending on what the behavior is. Like, I have friends and family that were addicts.
Yes.
When they come over for dinner, I'm not interrogating them, but they're not about to shoot up at my table.
Exactly. So it's like there are some rules here, and for me in raising my family, same thing. So I don't want to expose my young children too early. Because they're mine, and I'm going to indoctrinate them in my beliefs. And so if they get 18, and usually around 16, kids know how they're going to think or feel. And then when you're in my house, you might be faking it all the way. I don't care. But in here, this is how you're going to behave yourself. These are the rules. And when you get out on your own, hey, that's between you and God. It's a personal relationship. He works with us at different rates and stages. My walk is not your walk. And so I think for me as a Christian, I need to walk a particular way. And I think if we're too strict, if we're too rigid, how do we win people over? There's no way we can keep all those rules. That's why Jesus Christ had to die.
Yeah.
There's we're going to mess up somewhere at some time.
Yeah, and I feel like we're constantly going back and forth between the too rigid and then, we just let everybody do whatever they want because...
Right.
And it's hard. There's a tension there. Which brings up an interesting question along the lines of church on the west side. Shameless plug. I'm planting a church, Grace and Garfield Christian Reformed Church. We meet on Saturday evenings at 5 p.m., You can leave a comment or message me if you want more information. Anyways, back to you. So you've been part of a church on the west side for a long time.
Yes.
Have you noticed any trends over time and their approach to different things, worship styles, issues, positions on even homosexuality, abortion, namely in the churches on the west side that you have experience with?
So I'm a part of Rock of Our Salvation, Evangelical Free Church. So evangelical. So that tells you right there where their stance is. So for me, two of the things that they go after with such vengeance is homosexuality and abortion.
Mm-hmm. And what's the demographic of that church?
Probably all black now because it's a small portion of whites. It used to be, when I started there, it was much more diverse because the mission of it was racial equity and racial reconciliation.
Okay.
And so there was a bigger diversity. But today, that doesn't exist.
Because I had encounters with them as a kid. Because I think that's, when I was a kid, that was actually my first encounter with the Butlers.
Okay, so Raleigh Washington was there.
Raleigh Washington. He was the pastor there. And I met the Butlers at Camp Timberley.
Oh, okay.
Because when they would do urban camp, Charles Butler would lead the music there, and rock always brought. And I remember them being dominantly African American at that time, and then I lost track when the Butlers went over to Armitage, and then I haven't had much contact since.
So when we came, it was a big thing on racial reconciliation. So it was still probably about 70% African American and then 30% other. But there was a working in the community of blacks and whites understand the inherent differences. We're all people. Why are we so different? Why can't we get along? And so can we start doing work to make us get along better and understand each person's position? And then when Raleigh Washington and Glenn K. Wright, they were leading the charge on the racial reconciliation. And then it changed to his brother took the church. And his philosophy was a little different. He was more in evangelizing and outreach. So the theme kind of shifted. Yeah. And then the pastor that we have now, I don't know.
How long has he been there?
Let me see. I do not know how long he's been pastor. Maybe 8 years. Okay. 8 to 10 years. And so his thinking is different of how he wants to lead this group of people. For me, I always go into it, as a Christian, they're the two dominant rules we're supposed to follow. Love the Lord, thy God with all our heart, the mind, spirit, body. And the second one, love your neighbor as yourself. So for me and my family, if I'm not going to steal from myself, I'm not going to steal from you. If I'm not going to slap myself in the face, I'm not going to slap you in the face. If I'm not going to disrespect myself, then I'm not going to disrespect you. So I think when we look at relationships, really hedge on those two principles. Even if you're not a Christian, you got to have something that tells you what makes the relationship work. And so how do I want to be treated?
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like there's a guy out there, Jordan Peterson, who's some people love him, some people hate him. But the one interesting thing I thought he really brought to the table was from a scientific perspective. He basically says what you just said, is that whether you're Christian or not, you hold these two things. And in terms of the loving your Lord your God, you may not say it that way, but whatever you think is perfection, your ideal, the standard, you love that more than anything. And then you try to treat everybody else in that way. And that's kind of the Western world, at least attempting. Nobody does that perfectly.
Right.
But I find that concept to be really interesting because obviously right now I've been trying to plant a church during a pandemic, which is always fun. But one of the main reasons was the idea of the community church is that I know a ton of people in the community, a ton of Christians in the community that all go to churches in every which way. And some of them, like, they go to churches that they're kind of involved with. We don't really agree with them on this, but we just kind of go there. And I would just kind of find myself asking, okay, what would it be like for a bunch of us that all live in proximity to one another are asking ourselves these questions about what we believe together and are like saying, okay, well, what do we really think about this? And so the few people that we meet with regularly, it's kind of interesting, politically speaking, all over the kind of gamut, but also politically diverse in a way that people would be like, what? Like, you, for example, oh, you think Trump is right about something? Right. How dare you? You're black. You're not supposed to think that way. One guy was a huge Bernie supporter. Like, what do you mean? Like his big whole thing that drove him nuts was when Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And it's like, wait, what?
What does that mean? Yeah.
How is it that you get to say those things? And for me, I'm a Puerto Rican guy. I grew up on the West Side my entire life. But I tend to be conservative in the way that I live my life, like a lot of minorities on the West Side, or in the way that I think about life. And I've gotten from people, oh, you just must have been whitewashed before, because my skin is light. And I'm like, well, we can go outside and I'll show you how whitewashed. And then I'll probably lose my credentials as a pastor. But it's just so that was my motivation. Is like, we're all different. My wife and I are so different.
It is. It's interesting. Our not the alderman, our ward guy who comes around, and he was talking about, again, we get to this abortion issue, and he was like, yeah, but I know you guys are, you know, pro-life. I said, why would you say that? I say, because I have 15 kids. I say, but I made that choice. I was free to choose what I wanted my family to be like. Do I have a right to take that away from someone else? I chose. And again, God says, I'm not going to make you. I give you, you have free will. So if he is the creator of everything, and I believe that he is, and he gives us free will, who am I to take it away? Now, there are consequences to any choice that we make.
Yeah. And
so you're going to face those. So, but do I have a right to come and tell someone else, you know, because I decided for me? A lot of people think I should not have had 15 children. They think it's an abomination. Who would do that? Are you crazy? Oh, you know, I get all types of reaction. And I would feel,
and a lot of times that comes from the people that are against judging other people.
Yes. And it comes, it's really interesting to me. A lot of it's coming from Christian folk. So this is what I say to people. I said, the proof is in the pudding. I got 15 kids. Who's what? I said, you know, you got to think about, when you think about you using those words, I think people are anti-abortion because they don't want innocent children being killed. And they also know the psychological impact afterwards. Yeah. It really takes its toll.
Well, and it's complicated, I think, because there's a lot of people that are for and against it for different reasons. And I think, like, there's a mob mentality that goes into it. Some people were against abortion and then decided they don't like these people anymore, so they jumped to the other side. And if we were to have a conversation about it and really think through it, they actually don't even line up with it, but they don't know that they don't line up. You know,
right, because they haven't thought it through.
Yeah.
So, you know, I tell people, I'm like, think it through. Think about what this is. So if a woman has been raped, and I ask the guy, what? He's like, well, I say, not all women are strong enough to say, I was raped, I'm going to carry this baby through.
And so, you know what we do in those, you know what we do in those situations? We comb the universe to find one example of the one that was.
Yeah.
And say, look, she did it. Everybody should be able to do it. Or vice versa. Or we find the one that couldn't do it and we use her as, you're going to judge her? You're going to judge.
Right, exactly. Just like everybody is not up for having 15 children.
And the idea is, because whether we believe it's right or wrong shouldn't change based on that, right? It's like, if I believe it's wrong, then that girl that was weak enough or didn't have the strength, to a certain degree, if I believe that that's wrong, I should still be able to say it's wrong. But I shouldn't be a jerk about it, right?
Exactly.
Like, I should still be able to say, like, and this is the thing, like with addiction, with
and
like
that's
drug
where
addiction.
The compassion comes in.
Exactly. It's like, I believe that you shouldn't be abusing your body in such a way. But those that are, I'm not going to be like,
it is an illness. They need help.
Yeah.
How do we get them to a place where they don't have to abuse
But, and then there's the other aspect of it where, like, with drugs and abortion, where I think there's some people intellectually, like, once you allow it, it gets bigger. You know, once you, because if you disallow it, you're still going to have people that rebel and do whatever. But if you make it allowable, well, then the numbers have grown. And that's something that data supports. Like, once abortion became legal, it blew up as kind of a way of doing things.
And then it tapered off. And so the thing is.
And I'm not trying to support one side or the other. I'm just saying.
Illegal,
yeah.
You can't legislate morality. You can make laws, but people are going to do what they need to do. So making abortions illegal is not going to stop abortions from happening. We know that. Yeah. History tells us that.
But the question is, and I'm not saying that this is my business, the question is, will it reduce it? And will it reduce some of the tertiary effects? Like
there's already a reduction in abortion. One, because when you say I'm pro, it's like people have to be careful how they say that. Because if you use a condom, if you use rhythm method, if you use birth control pills, you're asking for a type of control of when a child is conceived.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes pregnancy happens with that birth control pills. Sometimes there is you self-abort because of the birth control pill.
Yeah.
But you just feel comfortable in your world because at least I didn't kill that baby. But you're still for control over your body.
Yeah. And that's an interesting principle. And this is why I say there's a lot of people that you need to have the conversation. And this is what I learned when I was teaching sex ed, is that it's so complicated. It's easy to just throw somebody under a label and judge them. And it's also easy just to say, well, whatever. I don't have any standards.
Right.
But it's a lot harder to actually, let's break this down. Like I always tell people in the issue of homosexuality, like, what does it mean to be gay? Well, I'm attracted to people of the same gender. I'm attracted to guys. Like, not sexually, but I'm attracted. There's certain guys that I'm like, I want to be around that dude. I don't want to touch him, but I want to hang out. Right. So then is it just sexual attraction? Well, I'm also sexually attracted to a lot of women that are not my wife. Does that mean, there's all these complicated aspects of it.
It's very complicated.
That we don't even have that conversation. It's just, well, are you for it or against it? Well, what am I for? Or what am I against?
And that's so they are mostly for a choice. So right there, so you get a choice and I don't?
And where does the choice, and at what level of choice?
What level, exactly.
Because we can't just choose whatever, right? So at some level, there are some parameters, but where you, to really figure out those parameters, it involves a really in-depth conversation and a lot of thought.
I think you really have to think about it. I think it's you're jumping to if you do it too quickly. And when I say that to people, they go, I say, so you want choice? They said, I said, but you are pro-choice. You are. You're saying you're not, but you absolutely are. Because you want to choose the size of your family when it comes. I said, so you're using the wrong verbiage for what you're fighting.
Yeah.
You're anti-abortion. Stop saying you're pro-life. Just stop it. Because if you were and you are a Christian, you would let things happen on this natural path. Because you're a person of faith, you will trust that God is going to give you the strength, the money, the finances to take care of these children that he give you because they're a gift. And I'm in a unique situation because of the fact that I have 15 children. So I can look at it on both sides.
Yeah.
And, people say, I say, look, I'm just saying. I say, you tell me what that means. If that's not choice.
Exactly. And that's one thing I've always wrestled with because, and maybe the Catholic Church has a better because they're anti.
Well, you use a rhythm. It's still a method. So even if you do what they prescribe as rhythm method, it's still a way of choosing when this child will be born.
Yes, they're trying to choose when a child will be born. And there's a difference in time and then trying to snuff out the possibility, if that makes sense.
Well, the birth control pill snuffs out the possibility.
And that's what I'm saying. But the Catholic Church, I think, is against all forms of contraception.
Right. So,
so they're the only ones that I think are at least a little bit consistent. But it's interesting because I feel like there's so many people that don't take that into consideration at all.
But they don't practice it. I got Catholic friends, they don't practice what they're saying. They just say,
nobody practices. Nobody fully
practices.
practices.
The church says that, but
Yeah, most people don't practice what the church says.
So why be so hard on this one group?
So I don't know that it's necessarily hard. It could be, but I think it's more that, and this is a conversation I have with my wife because I think my wife and I fall into different camps here, is there's the idea of establishing what the rule is or the norm.
Right.
And then allowing for exceptions. It's like, this is what we think is the right path.
Right.
Not everybody's going to jump on that right path, but that doesn't mean that we don't believe it's right. I mean, like, for example, how many people within the evangelical free church believe that premarital sex is wrong?
All of them say that.
All of them say that.
How many have engaged
are living
in
that out?
Practice?
But just because you fail, like, for example, I waited till I was married. But it was hard. It was very difficult.
Yes.
Okay. So if I messed up, does that mean I don't believe it? Or does that mean that it's difficult?
It means it's difficult.
And so that's what I think it's more like. So I don't think it's problematic necessarily for them to have that position. it depends on how they live that out or hold to it, or what do they allow for the exceptions to that?
Right.
So that norm, so to speak. I mean, that's what I think. My wife is a little bit different, I think. We've had a lot of conversations, and both of us are, I think, in a good way, shifting as we get to know each other and continue to have those conversations.
And as you live and you grow in wisdom and truth, you will change as your understanding becomes broader.
Well, that would be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right?
What you thought 5 months ago, you get a it's like, I get it.
Yeah. What's always interesting to me, though, is I've talked to people who switch their positions, but they do it so ignorantly. Like, that's when it bothers me. I'm like, I'm not bothered that you switched your position. I'm just bothered because you held this position ignorantly, and you jumped to the other side ignorantly. And it's like, you're still ignorant.
Right.
I want to think through and figure this out. And where you end up is where you end up. I can't control that. But I can at least influence and let you influence me. And and you influencing me doesn't mean I'm going to change my position.
It doesn't, but I think over time,
people
will get to think about it. Like the guy I got in a debate with, I said, well, I'm not thinking about the person as to whether or not they're a Christian, because if they're not a Christian and you're talking to them about this, they don't care because they don't hold your same beliefs. So what you're saying is like blowing smoke. Yeah. So how do we take a young woman who's in that position and she may not have any religious preference? How do we win her over? They ain't necessarily by, beating the Bible down on her. Yeah. What else is involved? Are we saying we're going to support you? We'll walk you through. We'll be there every step of the way with you. Do it.
And I think where the church messes up on a lot of that is because the question typically comes, well, what does that mean to love her? Because sometimes love is tough. True.
Love is really
tough.
But
I think one of the difficulties that a lot of Christians, especially Christian leaders, is I know the answer to that. This is exactly how you love it. And it's like, no, you don't.
Because it's an individual thing. Each individual needs something different. Again, I say, listen, I have my nephews that I help rear. I've gone through a lot of children. And so even outside of my 15, my husband and I, because it's something we believe in. And so I've got a big sample. So when people come to me, I'm like, I got you beat because I got a case study right in my back door. and I can tell you that each person needs love in a different way. We're not cranked out like we do automobiles. We're individuals, and we each need something different. Yeah. And so how I love you would be different from Michael's over here with us. How I would love Michael, because you're individuals. And so we got to become skilled at, and it takes a lot. In fact, you have to be intentional in it. Yeah. To say, how do I love this person? Where they are, where I hope they will get to be as a person of faith, Christian. How do I love them? So when I think about it, I'm like, God, no wonder you sleep. You never sleep or slump. You don't have time to. Because you got to look at each one of us and give us something different to grow us in the way that you need us to grow, to be able to carry out the work that you have for us to do. And so I just sit back here and I say, no, I'm like, I think you guys got it wrong. It's going to take a lot. And yes, the word says this. But if we were able to hold to all of that, Jesus Christ wouldn't have had to be without sin, shed his blood for my redemption. And so knowing that right there tells me, okay, what was Jesus? He was patient. He didn't, the woman at the well, he could have just said, girl, you got 5 husbands and stop playing with me. But what did he do? He didn't talk about her sin. He had said hey, can I get some of that water? It's calm conversation. And then he eased into it. And then he said, go and sin no more. Yeah, you're right. So you being honest with me, so he could deal with her in one type of way because she was honest. But some people ain't honest right off the bat. So then first you have to bring them to the reality that there's even something wrong,
yeah,
then you get to walk them through that path. But it's very time consuming, and we're so busy.
Yep.
We're
so busy traveling 6 miles to go see our friends and family.
Yes.
Because none of them live by us anymore.
Exactly. Which is really sad.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where there are because it becomes real easy for me to judge people that live that kind of way, right? And I'm trying to be better about that. But it's one of those where I wonder if that's the lesson to be learned over the past 20 years, that breaking down of communities, the tightness of communities, isn't good. Like I went to this, I think, metropolitan planning thing. I was invited years ago to just be on a panel where they wanted to talk to different people. And I said, the one thing that I'm discovering at the time I was teaching at a all-black high school, I was like, one thing that I'm noticing is that we keep trying to, all the administrators, all the counselors keep encouraging them to leave the neighborhood.
Right.
Like, they don't even want them to go to college in the state. They want them to go out because they would say they want to expose them. But the one thing I'm seeing, especially in immigrant communities, is they stay together real tight. And typically the next generation does better.
Right. I mean, my children, I tell them, listen, you're going to mess up in school. You're going to flunk some classes. Why do it when the class is $1,000 or $2,000? Go to city colleges.
Yeah, and or go to city colleges, go to the military where you're going to at least walk away with no debt.
Yes. Yes.
But that's so looked down upon.
And what are they trying to experience? So I find when children go away to campus, they're not really all that mature anyway. So they get inundated with all these different cultures, all this, and they come back a little wacky. And it's like, is that my child? Is that the military does something to them too, because they retrain them from everything that the parent has said. Because we need to train you to be able to do what we're directing you to do. Chicago, we have some of the best colleges here. Why am I going to stay in a campus to pay $30,000 to share a room with 4 people?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's the immigrant community, because I've seen this in the African American community and the Puerto Rican community. I would tell people it's one of those things where I feel like the teachers are trying to convince us that no, the government has your best interest in mind, and they're going to look out for you, and we keep buying it. And a lot of the immigrant communities come to like, this ain't our country. If anybody's going to care about us, it's going to be us.
Exactly.
And that they've utilized that oftentimes to their benefit. Because I see it in African communities, Nigerian, Kenyans that come over here. They have a much different experience and even Puerto Ricans that move over here from the island.
Right.
Have a different experience than us that are born here. And we think, yeah, we're all good. They love us. And it's like, and we're so willing to defy our families and our parents and our cousins for the sake of this new thing. And whenever we mess up, it's not that new thing that takes care of us. We come back to mom, dad, Theo, Titi, what, you know.
Yes.
The ones that actually, to a certain degree, have to love us.
Exactly.
And so, that's been really changing my framework. It's part of why I'm still living in Garfield, and I plan to continue living in Garfield forever, because that idea of the building of the community, of knowing my neighbors, taking comfort in that. If something happens, sure, I can call my brother, and he can be here in 30 minutes.
Exactly.
And he will.
Exactly.
But I can also call Mike 2 doors down, or
Same
PD
thing.
next door.
That's right.
And they'll be here in 30 seconds.
That's right. Same thing.
Only if I develop that relationship.
Exactly. And you have to build that. You know, my husband and I looked at properties in Oak Park, River Forest, and we thought, yeah, you know. And so it's 2 things. The houses were bigger. It would be quieter. But then I thought, who's cleaning this house when these kids leave? Because I ain't cleaning it. And we love the house at Oak Park and Chicago Avenue. Got in. I'm like, yeah, this would be great. It fits our family. It's awesome. And so then I thought, so what are you trying to say? I'm getting toward the end of my wanting to work vigorously. If I take on this house, then that means I've got to work like forever.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to do that? The real estate taxes are $35,000.
Yeah, they're way high in
right.
Park.
So it's like I don't want their school system. I'm not doing it for the school system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, can I build something where I live that's going to give me the same type of thing I want, but stay where I'm at?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think I can, and I can do it for
way
way cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what do they have, and is it possible to create that here?
Right.
I think that about that in terms of the school systems as well. And I'm not a very big fan of any school system, having worked in a variety of them. But it's like the business. Oh, they have business. Well, is there something I can do to help that here? Because that might be better than moving.
It might be better than moving. It's like, why am I always moving? Because someone said they have it.
Mm-hmm.
Better.
And I don't even know that that's all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. Right. Right. Maybe it's true.
Is that really better than what I already have? I mean, that's the human tendency. Actually, there's a philosopher that I'm getting into, French guy, René Girard, that's kind of discovered this idea about human behavior. I'm sure other people have discovered it before him, but he's written extensively on it. That the way that we act a lot of times isn't always about what we want, but what we see in other people. Like you see it with the kids. They're playing with a toy. There's a toy here they don't care about, but they're playing happily, and then some other kid comes and grabs that toy. All of a sudden, I want that toy.
Interesting. What's that he got over there?
Yeah, and it's this pattern in human behavior that's like, oh, that I want that Logan Square over there, and it's like, there's a lot of things that I value. There are things that drive me nuts about this neighborhood. The parties on Central Park.
Yes.
But the traffic, the central location, the parking.
I feel so blessed that I live and work in the same thing. I get to work in about 7 minutes.
Amen. I sell real estate. If you're looking for a realtor, let me know. But I specialize pretty much in this area, so I get to be here all the time. I mean, there's so many benefits to this community, but it's so easy to lose sight of those benefits by looking at the grass and the greener grass on the other side.
Yeah, and if you have news where they only report predominantly what went wrong, and it's not enough of reporting of what's going right. Yeah. And so I think that type of reporting causes disparity in people wanting to move into Garfield Park. If all you ever hear, well, there was a shooting over here, or this happened. Last week, a guy got shot in Austin, and he drove his car in front of our workplace, which made us get an incident report for something that actually happened in Austin. So Mike, who is my boss, we were talking, and the commander over there, my first thought was, okay, now we're going to get an incident report. So he was like, what made you say that? You said the same thing the commander said. I said, because it's going to be another, blight on, another thing happened when actually happened over in Austin. And he just drove, I don't know why. Hospital was right around the corner. I don't know where. Maybe he was trying to get to Cook County Hospital. Yeah. I don't know. But you were closer to West Suburban. Yeah. Or whatever their new name is, because I know they're not West Suburban anymore.
Are they not West Suburban? I thought they changed their provider, but I don't know.
Yeah. So, but you were in Austin, but you're going to drive this way.
Yeah. I go back and forth with the reporting because I feel like when they report it like they do, all the bad stuff, it makes people think, oh, that's just all that happens over there.
Right.
But when they don't, the politicians, look at how good of a job I'm doing. And it's like, no, you ain't. You're just not reporting.
Right. And if they think, I've been in some of the nicest neighborhoods. If they think that they're 100% crime free, they're not. Now, both of us come from a real estate background. Yeah. So we know that they're not going to, in those plush neighborhoods, they're not going to flash it all over the news that something happened there, because people become insecure because they feel like they're paying for safety. Yeah, I pay all this money, I should be safe. So they're not going to let that get out that this number of crimes happen. And then when they finally do say a crime, it's so horrific. And then they say, nothing like this ever happened Yeah, right. Whatever. But if they say it happens here all the time, there's a guy who lives in Oak Park. I was volunteering at Above and Beyond, and he was like, "Why do you live here?" I was like, "Wow, I think this guy."
I actually got asked that by a cop. I got pulled over once.
Why not?
And he was like, "Why are you over here?" I was like, "I live over there." So why would you want to live over here? I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to say. Is it because I'm light skinned? You think I should be better, or are you saying that? I don't even understand the question.
Wow, why do you live where you live? I mean.
Yeah,
because I have family here, and it's like you said, it doesn't have to be a blood relation.
Yeah, it's community here.
It's community here, and there's a lot of growth that's available here. Some of those other areas they've done their growing. There's no new growth, nothing happening. Yeah. And here it's like this unending growth where we can create. We can do things,
there's so many possibilities. If you want any of those possibilities or thinking about moving into Garfield Park, let me know. Always got to make those shameless plugs, right?
Yes.
But yeah, forever, I used to always tell people, I'm just trying to get people I know to move in. Partially, it improves the neighborhood. Partially, it means I don't got to drive anywhere.
I don't have to drive. That, not having my kids' school. So one of my kids go to Greater West Town. That's right at Franklin, Sacramento. Yeah. And the other one is at Shy Arts. If something happened, if I'm at work, I don't have a 2-hour commute if my child gets in some kind of emergency. I can almost walk at a fast pace and get there at a reasonable time to take care of what I need to take care of. And those things are important to me. Yeah. The people who live around me, that they don't have to be. I'd like to live around all Christians, but whatever. But sometimes I don't, because just because you say you're a Christian, but I want to live around people who have a sense of morality. Yeah,
a sense of morality, a sense of, and a willingness to talk. Like one of the guys, I actually haven't talked to him in a while, but I enjoy talking to him a lot. He's Muslim that moved into the neighborhood a couple of years ago, and we've had some really good conversations, and he's actually influenced my perspective on things in ways that I think are really great. So it's like, I don't necessarily want to be in a pocket where it's all Christian, but I do want to be in a place where people are really trying to think about what they, and sometimes I don't even care, because there's a lot of dumb people that I love to death and that I enjoy hanging out with, that it's just like, I guess I just want to have relationships that I know will continue. I do feel like especially with young kids, that you get to this point in your life where all your relationships starts to feel insecure. Like, am I going to still be able to be friends with this person in 2 years, or are they going to move away? Right. Because why am I even investing? And that I want to be in a place where it's like, you're at least my neighbor, and we're at least cordial, and you're in 5 years, you're still going to be my neighbor, and we can still rely on each other in that way.
And we don't always have to agree.
Yeah, and we could be totally different. You keep worshiping whatever. I'll still judge you when you're not around, but and you'll still judge me probably when I'm not around. But we know we're there. Right. And if there's a need, you're gonna care at least a little bit.
Right, and that's why I love about being here. I love it's stable. No, if nothing else, it's stable.
And my property value keeps going up.
It does, along with the taxes. But, the other thing that I'm working on to me is that if we say that our medium income, I'm just going to say $35,000 across the board, where are the rentals for that? Where are the buying opportunities at that $180,000 to $270,000 for people who want to be homeowners? Yeah, we have some investors who are just coming in, and they're in it for the money. Yeah. And so prices are naturally going up because material, there's a lack of labor, so labor is costing more. So we get it. But it's like, can you just make like $30,000 on your deal and not $80,000?
Yeah. And if I'm honest, that's never going to happen. And especially in East Garfield. There's probably some hope in West Garfield still, because there hasn't been as much torn down. So there's stuff that can be renovated, especially if you have some quality people. I know a guy that's a pastor in West Garfield that also does construction, that I get the feeling he wants to do some stuff there. But in East Garfield, it's just not going to happen. There's too many incentives at play that even the people that I know that are aside from you, that are in the game, they're talking about affordable housing, don't really mean it. It's just it's just a talking point to get people to like them and not protest what they're doing.
And I'm kind of glad I'm at a point that I know where my means at, the level I can live at, and if I get $10,000 from a deal, I'm good.
Yeah. What I do like is that there's more organizations that are starting to be involved in the West Side, Revolution Workshop being one of them, where we can't do affordable housing anymore. But maybe what we can do is increase the income for these people and not replace them with higher earners, but get them earning more.
Exactly. And that's the other thing we have to look at. So it's not a one solution thing. I think it's Yeah.
So we're not reducing the housing price to get the poor to afford them. We're trying to increase the poor so that they're no longer poor, so they can afford the housing.
You got to do both. Because we got those people who ain't never going to earn. They're not capable.
Yeah.
And so they need some housing. And you need diversity in community because that's what makes it great. And it keeps people sensitive to how other people live.
Yeah. And that's another aspect of it. Like, one of the things that really helped my family was just before I bought we moved on Walnut Street here, is that my brother and my sister bought a house, and my brother moved in, my sister moved in with her 2 kids, I moved in as a recent college grad, or I think I might have still been in college. My parents moved in.
Right.
So none of us were high earners, but we all lived there in this home together and saved up money, and eventually we bought, and kind of the amount of that we were able to earn grew, but we already had property.
Right.
And so that idea of staying home a little bit longer. I mean, when I bought my first house, I was living with my brother still, and I was about to get an apartment in Logan Square with my friend, because that's what you do.
Right,
and we could barely afford it. My brother said, "You go get that apartment, and I'll kick your." And he's like, "You stop helping with rent here, save up, put that money away, and go buy a house."
Which makes sense. And so when you're encouraged to do that, so that's what I tell my kids. I'm surprised when they're renting. I'm like, so you're building somebody else's dream. And I feel bad because this is what I do for a living. So I'm like, you guys should be purchasing. When my kids were thinking about my oldest daughter, she wanted to be on campus at the college. She did her 2 years here at City Colleges. And so I'm like, I'm not paying for dorm space. I'm like, but if you find a condo, and she's going Southern Illinois area, I said, Dad and I would buy a condo, find you 3 roommates. If I'm going to shell out $30,000 a year, it might as well be on something I'm going to actually own, not on the college campus.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? I say, I will buy it. I'd rather buy her a 3-bedroom condo. She shared with 2 roommates.
Yeah.
That takes care of the rent. And then she has something else that's hers or the family's to build on. Yeah.
No, that's super. And you know what? When I was teaching at Mount Carmel, I had a few students that were talking about going to University of Chicago for college after the fact, and their parents were talking to me. Maybe I'm thinking about getting a condo or a small property in that area so that my son can live there with roommates or whatever. And that mentality is like, that's a much wiser mentality.
Yeah, because why owe all that student loan debt? Teach them how to create wealth. So now, everybody's like, oh, get real estate, create wealth. I'm like, y'all know that's not how it works. It's not like you're going to buy a house and you're going to all of a sudden be wealthy. You got to work your plan.
And you got to take care of the house. And
you got to take care of it, right. And so it's like, it will lead to more stability, but it's not going to happen overnight necessarily.
And it's definitely not going to happen if you don't do it.
Correct. Absolutely. You have to do it. So, So living here, I love it. I thought about moving away, but when I go back and I'm like, okay, so why do you want to move away? Because there's more trees there, and I don't have to hear ambulances.
See, I have the benefit of when I go out on my back porch, right across the alley is a little urban farm, followed by another urban farm. Across the street is another urban farm. So I get probably more greenery in my view in my backyard than most people in the suburbs. The only time I considered moving away was when the COVID lockdowns first started. Because, I spent a lot of time on my block and it's improved a lot over the years.
Yes.
And then once the lockdowns happened, the drug market on my block, it's almost like we went back in time 10 years. And then it was like, there was a part of it that was, I feel like I put all this work into making this better. And
lost it.
And a bunch of other people that don't know anything about this neighborhood made some decisions without realizing that this was going to happen. I have no say in that. And then there was like one weekend, there was like 3 shootings like right in front of my house.
Whoa.
And so then it says, you know, I believe in being over here. I believe that I keep my family safe. But if one stray bullet hits one of my kids, am I going to regret that for the rest of my life?
Right.
You know, am I going to say, well, I still believe, you know, and I would like to think that yes, but I don't know what that kind of pain does to a person.
Because you don't know until you get there.
Exactly. And luckily, you know, I developed a relationship with the police captain just before he got transferred. But we were able to get things calmed down quite a bit more on the block.
Right.
And so now our block is cool. It's moved over to Lake Street. And then they opened the park, which...
The park is open now?
Enough for them to sell drugs in it. So that's still a work in progress.
It is. It is. You'll never get bored living in Garfield Park. There's always
work to do.
There's always work to do.
But at least that, like, clear and present danger has moved away a bit more, and that's eased up. And I probably would have stayed, but it's one of those things where I was shaky about it at that point.
It's tragic because I think about the same things as my kids are walking to the train or they're doing things. It's how do you prepare for these things?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, you do well to raise your kids not to be involved in that mess.
Right.
But it doesn't, sometimes they're not involved.
And they still get impacted.
Yeah. And so.
And I think leaning on my situation, my inner family with my brother and my cousins, I think that I would be okay because of my life experience, because I've gone through something that's tragic and close to heart and been able to know that I can get through it. So, you know, being older, I know, okay, these things happen and you can get through it. You can survive it. And so it's like, okay, you have to deal with it when it comes. So, but I love where I'm at. I wouldn't.
And which street are you on?
I'm on Walnut Street.
Walnut Street.
Yeah,
that's
Walnut.
The best. I'm on Walnut Street.
2800 block.
I'm 3500, but we're right across from the conservatory.
We are.
Yeah, so I love it there. Like I said, I'll probably be there a long time. Unless somebody takes me out.
Yeah, I don't see any reason.
Which could happen because I got road rage real bad. So I starting fights with people that I know I shouldn't fight. If I've ever cut you off or cursed you out in the street, I am so sorry. It's a work in progress. It's like the park.
It's a work in progress. Yeah, so I like it. When I think about the reasons for me to move, I always have a balance. My mind was lost. I always have that scale of balance. What are the reasons for me to stay? You know, you can every other day you want to leave something. Yeah. And so it's like, why should I stay? And at the end of the day, staying feels good. Yeah. You know, we got that new roller rink
over there.
On Madison.
I'm never going there.
You should come.
I'm not meant to be on wheels like that.
We're going to get those things that hold you up.
Okay, that's what I want. I want people to get pictures of me.
We're going to get them because I haven't skated in quite a while. And I'm like, I need that thing that you. He's like, oh, yeah, we should order those. I'm like, right. And then I'll get on the skates.
I'm comfortable sitting by and watching other people enjoy themselves.
But, you know, we're thinking about ice skating too. They do movies there.
I'm Puerto Rican. I'm a tropical people. We ain't spending time on the ice. That just means I just don't want to be embarrassed.
That's bad. But, you know, they're doing movies over there.
That's
and
good.
They're going through the second phase of the renovation of it. So, but, you know, even when we started putting that there, people said, well, people are going to get shot. I'm like, the kids are getting shot sitting on their front stairs.
Yeah, it's going to happen anyway. It's
like, but... And we're not asking any of the other environment to move. If you can manage to live in harmony with us here, knock yourself out. But this is what we're going to be doing. Yeah. But we know what typically happens. They get uncomfortable. And so they move along. And I'm not mad about that either. Yeah. But come skate with us. Come, Joy, remember what it's like to do those family events.
And that's the thing that, like, what I would tell people when it got real bad on my block is that I don't hate these guys. Like, a lot of them, they're kids. They're young people with some incentive structures. I don't hate them. I don't want it to be happening by my house. And I wish that there was something I can do
to give them an alternative.
Yeah.
What else could you do?
Yeah, and that's part of the work that we do in churches and whatnot, and in the community groups, is we want to create a place for them to have something better to do. And that's hard. I've lost students that, I had a student that was in high school that I didn't even find out, but I remember he would always come. He didn't live by my block, but he would always come there, and I would see him, and I knew he was involved. And I'd be like, "You need to stop that. You know, your parents are at home. Go home. Go do it." And then I found out a year later that he had been killed in the shooting.
Wow.
I was like, man, I wish there was something, other words I could have said that would have convinced him. No, do this. And that's hard, as you see 20 guys out on the corner.
Right.
And it's like, I want better things for you, but I can't force you.
You have to want those things for yourself. So at some point, you have to decide, I want this for myself.
Yeah.
And you might die trying to get it.
Yeah.
In some cases for our kids. But, try. What else can I do? And we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the programming.
Amen.
We don't have all the money that's needed to kind of cure something that's systemic in nature and even continues.
And part of the human condition, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just, if I was in a similar situation when I was 17 years old, would I have been any different? Maybe. I would like to say I would, but
I know for my parents, so we come very old school. You couldn't bring anything.
Well, that's part of why I didn't get into trouble.
Yeah, in
my dad would have.
Yeah, you couldn't bring anything in my parents' house that they didn't buy.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. If I was 17 and I didn't have my
the
parents,
structure that you have.
Exactly. I mean, because that's what I always say about the parties in Central Park. If I was in my early 20s, and even me with all the structure growing up, I probably would have been over at that party. I wouldn't have been involved in some of the behaviors that are happening, but I would have been laughing and laughing at the people that are involved.
Well, I know before one of my sons went to the service, he went to this party. I was there too. Well, I was like, hey, there was like, Miss Kelly. I was like, hey. I'm like, oh, I don't think your mother wants you doing that. Get a hotel. And they're like, your mother is at the party. I'm like, I'm grown. I can be anywhere I want to be. I want to see what y'all do. And they're like, oh, man. So, of course, there was a little tension because they're like, man. Yeah. And so when we look at our children, we tell them, so he went to this other, like a rent party, we would call when we were coming up. And we told him, like, dude, my husband was like, you shouldn't be there. No. I was like, okay. So we had gone to the store on Fulton. Fulton Street used to be a mess. So we come back home, the police are all around, and my son we're in our big white van. He's like, hey, Dad, I'm going to my father. I'm like, oh, so now you know us. And we're like, dude, did we not tell you? Not a good idea. But for the grace of God that they, I haven't lost any children. They're not angels. They're young people, like you say, they do what young people do. But I've been spared that so far, and I'm grateful for that. But like you say, young people, they think they have for forever.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that educational system, a lot of the media, like, we want to hear from young people. I'm like, I don't want to hear from no young people. I was young. I remember, and I don't think those ways now.
Right, because when you look back and say, man, was I kept out of a lot of trouble. Such and such and things should have happened to me, but I was spared, and that didn't happen. And then I like something that you said about being a conservative Puerto Rican. Most people will look at me and my family and they think, and I'm like, you just would not believe. A lot of people say, are you a Republican? I'm like, no. I'm like, not in the sense that, it's like, I don't know how y'all using that word Republican. Yeah. But am I conservative? Absolutely. More than a lot of people would imagine. Because they're like, wow. I'm like, yeah. They're like, we didn't know that. I'm like,
Well, and it's so weird for me because especially when I talk to like suburban white people, there's this oh no, black people are like this or Puerto Rican people are like this. I'm like, what TV show are you watching?
Right.
Like there's in a lot of ways because of the church involvement, a lot of blacks and Latinos are very conservative. Maybe in their lifestyles they do different things, but in kind of what the belief systems that they espouse, it's
right. And so their behavior is not going to be too outlandish because of those inherent beliefs.
You go to guys on the corner, a lot of times you'd be like, hey, like, especially when I would come in here for church and they'd be out there, oh, we have a church here. Like, oh, okay. And they start walking away because they don't want to block the...
Right.
And it's just like, they at least have that. And
exactly.
And they will still judge each other.
Right. And then they'll recognize it, and then they'll know your pattern. Like, no, they have church here. Come on, move over on this side. Or when we...
I can't smoke a cigarette. Like,
right.
I never said nothing about you smoking that cigarette. But
they
have that.
When we moved to our office over on Washington, the guys would hang on that fence because the building that office space was empty. So I come in the morning, I look, and I was like, wow, I said, I'm just going to give you the FYI. I don't want to see you getting arrested. I really don't. I said, but hanging on that fence, I said, because I have to conduct business and I can't have you scare my clients away. So fair warning that these are the next steps. And so that you know, oh, no, we got it. So no hanging on the fence. I'm like, no hanging on the fence. Not this one.
Yeah.
And I'm good. I don't want to see you in jail because it's not a good place. They're not, they're not rehabilitating them in a way that they can be more productive. It's just a holding spot. So, no, I don't want to see you there.
Yeah.
For what? Because it hasn't proven that it's doing much good. If we don't address what caused you to be in this, and you don't address, so I ain't trying to solve everybody's issue.
Yeah.
You gotta want to help yourself.
Yeah.
Now I can tell you, you can do this, and I'll help you carry your bucket. I'm not carrying your bucket for you. Wish you well, and I'm gone.
Amen. All right. Well, I know how it is talking to you. We can go on forever.
We can. Yes.
And that's good. I hope this was an experience for some people, and we'll have to work on getting you out again.
Awesome.
But again, if you enjoy hearing these conversations, please like, share, subscribe if you're into that. This is Pastor Mo and LaShone Kelly.
Hi, everyone. See you later.
See you later. Thank you very much.